I spent a lot of time on the trails over the years, and there's something I've noticed about hikers. We're always looking toward the next destination, the next shelter, the next water source, the next summit, the next mile marker. Welcome back to Eremos. Last episode we talked about desire. We explored how the wilderness revealed something I didn't want to admit. I desired peace more than I desired God. Peace isn't a bad thing. Stability isn't a bad thing. But somewhere along the way, I had started treating those things like the answer. The wilderness exposed that. After that realization, another question began to surface. If peace was what I desired most, then where was that desire taking me? Sometimes we become so focused on getting somewhere that we forget where we are. I've experienced that on trails for years. You reach the summit you've been climbing toward all morning. You stop, take in the view, catch your breath, maybe eat a snack. Then before long, your eyes drift toward the next destination, the next ridge, the next shelter, the next mile marker, the next place you think you'll finally arrive. As I reflected on my own wilderness journey, I began to realize I wasn't just doing that on the trail. I was doing it in life. If I can just get through this season, just find another job, just get financially stable, if life can just calm down, if I can just find some peace. There was always another destination somewhere down the trail, and for years I believed that when I finally reached it, everything would be okay. What I didn't realize was that the things we chase have a way of shaping the direction of our lives. And sometimes the wilderness reveals not only what we desire, it reveals what we've been pursuing all along. As I reflected on that trip, I remembered something else that had happened on the trail. When I started the hike, my plan was to finish in Damascus. If you've ever hiked that section of the Appalachian Trail, it's the logical endpoint. The trail carries you downhill into town. It's a natural place to stop, an easy way to finish the journey. But as I got closer, I started thinking about another option. Backbone Rock, a spur trail that leaves the Appalachian Trail and heads in a different direction. At the time, my reasoning wasn't very spiritual. I thought it would be shorter. I thought it would be easier. After everything that I had been carrying, easier sounded pretty good. So I changed my plans. What I didn't know was that Backbone Rock wasn't easier at all. It started with a steep climb, the descent was rough, and somehow the route ended up being longer than simply finishing in Damascus. I wanted the easier path. Instead, I got the harder one. Looking back, that seems fitting, because that's often how God works in my life. I wanted the quickest route to peace, the quickest route to relief, the quickest route out of the wilderness. Instead, God kept leading me deeper, not because He was punishing me, not because He enjoyed making things difficult, but because He wanted to show me something I couldn't see on the easier path. It was somewhere along the harder trail that a simple thought entered my mind. Hiking guide. At the time, it didn't seem important. Just a passing thought. A small seed planted in the middle of the wilderness. I had no idea that seed would eventually grow into Eremos. I don't know if God would have spoken to me if I had finished in Damascus. Maybe He would have. But I know this. He spoke to me on the Backbone Rock Trail. The more I reflected on that trip, the more I began to notice a pattern. Not just in my life, in Scripture too. There are moments when God exposes not only what we desire, but what we've been chasing. And one of the clearest examples is a man we often call the rich young ruler. It's an interesting story because on the surface, he seems to have everything figured out. He's successful, respected, religious. The kind of person most of us would assume is doing just fine. Yet something is missing. So he comes to Jesus with a question. What must I do to inherit eternal life? I've always found that question fascinating because it reveals something about the human heart. We are always looking for the next thing, the next achievement, destination, the next answer, the thing that will finally make us feel complete. The ruler had wealth, he had influence, he had status, but he was still searching. He had spent his life pursuing something, and somehow he knew he hadn't arrived. Then Jesus does something remarkable. He doesn't begin by condemning him. He doesn't shame him. Instead, he reveals him. Much like the wilderness had begun revealing me. Jesus eventually tells him to sell what he owns, give to the poor, and follow him. The man walks away sad, not because Jesus asked him to do something impossible, because Jesus exposed what sat at the center of his life. The issue wasn't money, the issue was devotion. Jesus revealed the thing he couldn't let go. Money was simply the thing that revealed where his trust was placed. As I reflected on that story, I realized my issue wasn't money either. It was stability. It was relief. After losing my parents, our jobs, our home, after walking through depression and isolation, I wanted things to stop moving. I wanted life to settle down. I wanted something solid to stand on again. And honestly, I don't think those desires were wrong. Who wouldn't want stability after everything had been turned upside down? Who wouldn't want relief after carrying so much for so long? The problem wasn't the desire itself. The problem was what I believed that desire could do for me. I began to believe that stability would save me, that relief would heal me, that peace was waiting somewhere farther down the trail. If I could just get there, then everything would finally be okay. Looking back, I can see how those desires shaped my decisions. They shaped my prayers. They shaped the direction of my life. I wasn't chasing wealth. I wasn't chasing success. I was chasing a future version of life where everything finally felt stable again. But the wilderness has a way of exposing the things we pursue. And what it revealed in me was this. I wanted God's gifts more than I wanted God's presence. I wanted relief. God wanted a relationship. I wanted stability. God wanted dependence. I wanted peace. God wanted me. And those are not always the same thing. That's what made the wilderness difficult. The very things I was chasing weren't bad things. They simply weren't the destination. Peace isn't the destination. He is. And maybe that's why the story of the rich young ruler feels so familiar. Most of us aren't chasing wealth, at least not in the way he was. But all of us are chasing something. Something we believe will finally make everything okay. Maybe for you it's security or success. Maybe it's approval or comfort. Maybe it's a version of the future where all the pieces finally fall into place. The question isn't whether you're pursuing something. We all are. The question is whether that pursuit has become your destination. What occupies your thoughts when you're alone? What do you find yourself daydreaming about? What are you afraid of losing? What do you keep telling yourself will finally bring peace? Because those often reveal what we are truly chasing. The wilderness has a way of exposing that. It strips away distractions, it quiets the noise, and eventually we're left face to face with the things that have been directing our lives all along. For me, it was stability. It was relief. I became convinced that if I could just reach the right destination, everything would finally be okay. But every destination eventually became another starting line. The peace I was chasing never seemed to last. There was always another problem to solve, another season to survive, another destination somewhere farther down the trail. And that's when I began to realize something. The things we chase make promises. They promise peace, security, satisfaction, relief, but they can never fully deliver. Not because they're bad things, because they were never meant to carry that weight. Only God can do that. Only God can satisfy the deepest hunger of the human heart. Only God can provide the peace we're searching for. The wilderness revealed something I desperately needed to learn. Peace isn't the destination, He is. Jesus understood this. That's what makes His temptation in the wilderness so important. When we read Matthew 4, it's easy to focus on the bread. After 40 days of fasting, Jesus was hungry. Of course He was hungry. He was fully human. Hunger wasn't the issue. The issue was what He would do with that hunger. The enemy comes to Him and says, "If you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." On the surface, that doesn't seem like a terrible suggestion. Jesus was hungry, and bread would satisfy a legitimate need. There was nothing sinful about eating. The temptation wasn't bread. The temptation was pursuing satisfaction apart from the Father. The temptation was taking a shortcut. The temptation was trusting something other than God to meet His need. And that's what makes the wilderness so familiar. Different wilderness, same question. What are you counting on to satisfy you? For the rich young ruler, it was wealth. For me, it was stability and relief. For Jesus, the temptation was immediate satisfaction. The details are different. The question remains the same. Will I trust the Father, or will I chase something else? Jesus responded by saying, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." In other words, life is found in far more than getting what we want. Life is found in trusting God. Even when we're hungry, even when we're tired, when we're hurting, when relief seems just one decision away. I think that's what I was learning on that trail. I thought what I needed most was stability or relief or peace, but God was teaching me something deeper. The answer wasn't farther down the trail. It wasn't waiting at the next destination. It wasn't found in finally arriving. The answer was Him. And maybe that's one of the hardest lessons the wilderness teaches. The things we chase can never satisfy the deepest needs of our hearts, not because they're bad, but because they were never meant to replace God. This week, I want to encourage you to spend a few minutes alone with God. Take a walk, sit on a porch, find a quiet place, and ask Him a simple question. Lord, what am I chasing? Then listen. You may not like the answer. I didn't. But what God reveals, He can transform. And sometimes the first step toward freedom is simply being honest about where we are headed. Different wilderness, same question. What are you chasing? Thank you for walking with me. Until next time, grace and peace.